Wonderful to have you here. What a great packed audience as we speak, and I know that you're making time for us in amongst plenty of voting going on across the road, so we really do appreciate it. Please do, once again, take photos. I see you already in the audience doing it. Get on Instagram, get on Twitter. We're a tech conference. We want to talk technology. Hashtag STYT, but also send us your questions once again. Ask Jeremy what you're thinking. But I want to first of all get what you're thinking. How can the government, how can our Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport help you right now? Polling, I want to ask whether your #1 issue for the UK government should focus on is to aid tech, access to tech talent at the moment, to visas. Is it access to capital, or is it access to infrastructure? Get voting, because we're going to put them to Jeremy as how they're already focusing on it, and indeed might be able to help at the moment. Oh, no, that's the wrong...
Different one.
That's the wrong one. I'm not sure who's that for.
It says, if you were Prime Minister, what would you do? So
yes.
I'm answering that one.
Who's this? Oh, yeah. There we have it. Thank you, 100%. Can we have the other poll, please? I'm not sure where this one has stemmed from. We'll wait until they get the other poll ready, but that's quite interesting. We will bring you a new poll in a moment, but get ruminating on that. But first of all, let's answer perhaps a key question there, access to talent, because you've already been helping in the area of artificial intelligence. Here we go. 18.5 million you're putting in to help the hiring of and training of artificial intelligence, new recruits. How?
Yes, so that's this week's announcement. Of course, it's not the only thing we're doing. So we recognise that for a lot of the businesses in this room and many beyond it, talent is a huge concern. We're probably finding this out. Yes, we are.
55%.
And that breaks down into two things. It breaks down into immigration, which we might come on to, and it breaks down into skills. And skills are about making sure we've got people with the right talent, going into the right training schemes, having the right kind of higher education and further education. And we've already put money into making sure that there are more PhDs, that there are more master's programs. The 18.5 million that you've referred to is to do something slightly different, but we think just as important, which is to find people who may not be in the AI field now, but may benefit from transferring into it, and to give them the opportunity to retrain, reskill, and move across. And if we're going to drive the AI revolution in the way that we want to, and we want to be world leading in that, we are going to need the right people to not just come through school and university, but also to perhaps come across from doing something else at the moment. So that 18.5 million is predominantly about getting people across from other sectors or other disciplines into AI.
How do you get the message out to those that have no real concept of artificial intelligence as it stands, but might be really rather good at it?
Well, I hope Bloomberg's helping me do it right now, and I think there are other ways in which we can, and I hope that, again, the tech sector itself will want to help us promote that, because I'm sure for many people here and in the sector more broadly, they recognise there are good people out there who perhaps don't see themselves now as ideal fits for the tech sector or for working in AI. And I think it's really important that we get the message across that there are huge opportunities here. There are very exciting prospects for careers in the tech sector, and you don't necessarily have to come from a particular narrow background in order to do those things. And the more we can get that message across, the better.
I think 57% worrying about access to talent is in some way demonstrative of also the future of the United Kingdom, of the London technology scene, of the areas outside London, access to talent because of Brexit, because of concerns about immigration. And would you say that that's the right concern to be having right now? What have you done to stave off that issue and that worry?
Yeah, I mean, certainly an understandable concern, and I think what we get very clearly, not just from the tech sector, from every other kind of business, is the worst thing in the world is uncertainty. You need to tell us what's going to happen so we can plan for it, and I understand that. The problem, as most people will appreciate, is it's very hard to tell them exactly what's going to happen. But what we can say is that on the field of immigration, as we leave the European Union, we're going to be designing our own immigration system. We don't quite start from a blank sheet of paper, but almost. And there's therefore a great opportunity for the tech sector to talk to us during Tech Week and well beyond it about what sorts of things people want to see in our immigration system as we leave the EU that will enable us to carry on bringing in the people that we want and need. It's a pretty foolish government that designs an immigration system that doesn't allow relatively easy access to the UK for the people who can really drive economic growth and improvement and add to our society in so many other ways. So across the range of the things that my department's responsible for, people are saying to me, I'm worried that I won't be able to get in the talent I want, and it doesn't matter whether it's designers in AI or whether it's orchestra conductors. The concerns are similar, and the answer's the same, which is come and help us design this new system that will give you what you want as well as giving us what we want.
It's interesting that we came on straight after a panel that was discussing the hub, the tech hub that is London. But we've got to remember that potentially, surrounding Brexit, many felt that London was a bubble. There are other places out there. How are you seeing growth in the technology sector outside of where we sit now?
Yes, we're seeing huge growth, and I think people are right to point out that it's not just about London. Actually, some people have said to me, why is it called London Tech Week at all? But I think London is a huge powerhouse in all of this. But there are many other places that are doing tremendously well. And if you actually look at the performance of the so-called unicorns, those companies that have started with very little and become billion-dollar enterprises, we're seeing huge performance, not just in London, but in other cities around the UK as well. And if you look at the report that's been produced today, that deals with the number of new job opportunities that have been presented and promoted in the tech sector over the last 12 months or so. They're coming from places like Oxford, Cambridge, Reading, Belfast, Newcastle. These are places all around the UK that are doing tremendously well. So the UK tech sector is just that. It's the tech sector for the whole of the UK.
It's interesting that we've got some great questions coming from the audience, and we're almost talking about diversity in that, not diversity outside of London. There's a question in terms of diversity of how is the government, how are you thinking top of mind about ensuring there's diversity of female founders and entrepreneurs and funding there? Is that something that you think about and work about?
Yeah, very much so, and I think there are a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We are seeing more female founders in the sector and doing well and staying involved, which is hugely important too. And we need to make sure that girls are coding just as boys are coding at school and beyond. And we need to make sure that there are role models for them to look at and see, yes, I can do well in this sector. All of that matters. And actually, we talked about artificial intelligence earlier on, and the reason that diversity is really important, whether it's gender diversity, ethnic diversity, or any other kind, is that one of the concerns people will legitimately have about artificial intelligence is, as you develop the AI system, as you're developing the machine in the black box that delivers the AI outcome, how can I be sure that it's not a biased outcome that's being produced? And the truth is that people might be trying very, very hard to produce an unbiased outcome, but every invention bears the imprint of its designer, and that's even more true for AI. So we need a diverse workforce to make sure that the AI product isn't building in unconscious bias. So diversity matters not just because it's the right thing to do, but frankly because it'll produce better products.
It's interesting that we then talk about capital access, and you've answered that in terms of 18.5 million helping with the tech talent. What about access to capital for these startups that we're seeing? Another question from the audience says, why is raising, I assume they mean fundraising in the US, so much easier than in the UK? I mean, we could debate this for a long time, but you must speak to investors. You must be there reassuring them about why this is still a good place to put your money to work. How have you found investor sentiment in the UK?
I mean, I think the evidence shows actually that we do very well in terms of venture capital investment, people coming in and putting their money into the UK tech sector. We're seeing huge investment, far greater actually than most of our rivals. Now, it's true that in the US there's a particular set of circumstances that pertain. They do have advantages, but the truth is that we're doing remarkably well. And what's really needed is a recognition by those who are offering capital of the particular needs of the tech sector. What we call patient capital is really important. You're not going to get overnight results. You may see some failures before you see some successes. So we need, I think, investors who are prepared to accept that reality. And increasingly, we are seeing investors prepared to accept that reality, who see the potential of the tech sector, and may I say, specifically, what we call tech for good. So I think it's hugely important that we focus also on that part of the tech sector that is doing those things for huge social benefit, who've always found it more difficult, of course, to attract this kind of tech sector investment, who are now finding it a bit easier, I'm pleased to say, still not easy, but easier, and we're starting to see those so-called impact investors who want to find a social purpose as well as an economic return in what they do.
How are you helping the so-called tech for good, the social impact investing?
So we've started to set up a £30 million investment fund that will be specifically focused on, for example, tech for good. And everything the government does is designed to drive confidence in the tech sector. We want people to come here and invest. We have certain advantages that even the government can do nothing about. The fact that we speak and code in a language the world easily speaks and codes in, the fact we're in a good time zone, all these things matter. But actually there are other things the government can do something about. The promotion of a truly world-class university sector really matters. We have 4 of the 10 top universities in the world in the UK. All these things make a difference, as well as the general policy environment we work on.
I think what was really interesting, we've just lost the poll. Clearly there you're working on access to capital, access to capital for the right sort of companies as well. There's also a focus on infrastructure, and someone from the audience has said, oh, what about 5G? What about 5G? What about 5G when we have so much glare and focus upon Huawei as a key player on our infrastructure, telecoms infrastructure as it stands, and a question surrounding that company going forward? Are we going to be set at a disadvantage compared to Asia and the US?
No, and I think 5G is hugely important. Every country is wanting to be ahead of the game on 5G, and we've started to talk already about those things we can do to make sure that we will be pioneers in 5G technology with all it can deliver. So some of the test beds and trials projects that the government has initiated, 40 million extra we're talking about this week, delivered to test beds and trials to actually work out what 5G can deliver to our economy and to our society, to the transformation of public services it may be able to deliver. But, of course, you also have to think about where you're buying the equipment from to roll out a 5G network. Now, my view is that this is not solely about one company or even about one country. It's about how you develop a telecom supply chain in particular that is safe and secure. What do you need to do to make sure that whoever it is and wherever they come from that's supplying the equipment, they meet our requirements for safety and security? And the more 5G does, the more important that becomes. So I'm focused on developing a system that will work for everybody, including Huawei, so that we can make the right judgments about who should supply our equipment based on how safe and secure we need the system to be. I absolutely understand that for those telecoms companies that are waiting for us to deliver a specific answer on Huawei, they're very impatient and they say, not unreasonably, get on with it so we can decide what to do. But there are a number of factors to take into account, some of which, of course, are outside our shores. What other countries do also has a bearing, and we have to factor that in.
How difficult has the United States made things?
Well, I wouldn't say they've made it difficult. I think what they're doing is, A, they're making decisions in their own interests, as every government must do, but they're also, of course, making judgments in a hugely interconnected telecoms world. So if you have Huawei equipment that either has US IP or US components within it, then what the American administration decides to do will have an impact on what we consider when we come to think about Huawei. So I think it's just a reflection of the fact that this is an interconnected world and an interconnected sector.
Interconnected, certainly it is, and it's an interconnected sector with the rest of Europe, with the rest of EMEA, Africa. There's an interesting point being made by Duncan Wales of Telema here, saying London is the tech centre for Africa, South Asia, not just UK and Europe as well. How are you looking at ensuring that our connectivity remains as strong as it can be in the midst of the uncertainty of Brexit and whatever exit we have from the EU that ends up happening?
Well, look, I mean, connectivity means lots of different things, and as your poll reveals, there are lots of things that affect our connectivity that government has to think about. Infrastructure is a very obvious example. But the other point in your question is also significant, that about half the world is online now. That means half the world isn't. And there are opportunities for the UK tech sector to help that other half get online, to be engaged. And so we need to think about what we do working internationally as well as what we do domestically in what, as we've said, is a hugely interconnected world.
And engaged safely. And it's an ongoing debate. I sit in the United States at the moment, and what's taking front of mind for the investors in Google and Facebook is what's happening on Capitol Hill, the sudden focus on antitrust, on competition, and on safety. How are you still focusing on that? Are you able to focus in on it as much as you'd like to amid the distraction of Brexit?
Yes, very much so. And it is a priority for me and for the government, and we are leading the world on this. So the Online Harms White Paper, which people, I hope, will have seen, is a way of setting out what you do about the gap that's emerging between the control of bad behaviour on broadcast media and print media, even out in the street, and the control that exists for material that's online. And actually, this is not a government versus business and enterprise discussion. Because if you want your online company to be successful, you want your enterprise to grow, then you need people to be confident about staying online. The longer they're online, the more things you can sell them. And so if people aren't confident about the safety of themselves and their children online, they won't spend more time online, they'll start to spend less. And that is a problem for businesses. So actually there is no discrepancy between what we want and what the sector wants. We all want a safer internet. And that requires, I'm afraid, some intervention from government. We have got to start to set up a regulatory framework that will do the job of keeping us as safe as we can be online. It doesn't mean that every bit of bad material will be prevented from reaching every vulnerable consumer, but it does mean that we will set a requirement for every online company that deals with user-generated content to keep their users as safe as they reasonably can, and there will need to be a regulator to enforce that requirement. Now, if we start to do that, I think other countries that face exactly the same kind of pressures from their citizens will look at what we're doing and I hope find inspiration in it to do something similar themselves.
Hopefully continue to be the leader there. What about encouraging innovation within government itself? There's a great question from the audience saying, are you in any way looking at the public sector to try to think more like the startups that we're lucky enough to have in the room today?
Oh, we try. But look, I mean, government is an organisation that doesn't quite have the fleetness of foot of many of the organisations who are sitting here represented. Now, I think we all try and make sure that some of the inventiveness, some of the speed of decision-making, some of the adaptability of the companies that operate within the tech sector can be adopted in government too. That's not always an easy task. I would say we're getting better at it. I think the ability to understand, frankly, what these digital innovations can do for the delivery of government and the delivery of public services is something we're all getting to grips with. And I think the government digital service, the opportunity for us to actually deliver government in a different way is again something we lead the world on. I mean, the idea of something called gov.uk, where you go for all government services, is something that was initiated here in the UK. And so other countries are doing it now too, but we, broadly speaking, led that trend. And I think we need to lead the next trend towards giving citizens the opportunity to operate digitally, not just in the private sector, but in the public sector too.
You mentioned how, and I think it's true, that the ethics around AI has been led by the UK in many ways, thankfully, because it was where DeepMind was born is here, and we've had the wonders of those founders being able to advise with the government and thinking about ensuring there isn't bias built into the system. AI is clearly a dominant force in the UK. We can show off the thinking and the talent we have here. So too is fintech to a certain degree. Where else, what other subsectors are you seeing excitement in, areas of growth in?
Well, I'll give you one other example, and that's green tech. So I think the opportunity for us to use technology in order to deliver a greener country and a greener planet is again something the UK is very strong on, and we can see from our media that that is an increasing interest of the public. So there are many areas in which I think we will be world leading, but we will only do it if we manage several things at once. First of all, we have to create the environment in which businesses can thrive. Second, we have to give the public the reassurance that the ethical and regulatory structures that surround these innovations are robust, and they're going to protect data, they're going to protect privacy, they're going to protect the individuals who will want to support these technological advances, but will in many cases worry about where they're leading. So that is a responsibility for government to take on in partnership with the tech sector.
Can you really feel at the moment that despite the last few years of inward looking, that we've still got a government, we've still got a country that allows businesses to thrive?
Yeah, I do think that, and I think, you know, the impression can easily be created that we're contemplating our own navel over Brexit. But actually the truth is, as I'm uncomfortably aware, Brexit's taken a little bit of time. And over those periods, that time, those years, we've still seen huge inward investment into the UK, huge confidence in the UK and the talent we have here and the environment we create. And so I think we need to be self-confident about this. We need to accept that, of course, what everybody wants is to move past this period of uncertainty and be able to focus on something else. But even during this period, the UK has been tremendously successful. It has led the world in technological innovation, in regulation, in ethical frameworks. We've done all of those things while still managing Brexit at the same time. Imagine what we could do if we weren't managing Brexit at the same time. So I think actually the world is looking at us with favour. It's looking at us as a good place to invest, good place to base itself and to develop these fantastic new industries.
I mean, I was amazed that still record venture capital coming into this country in 2018. What about what you now would like the entrepreneurs, the venture capitalists, thought leaders in the audience to be doing for you now? Is there anything that they can come, either can they be coming to you with views, can they be just setting about their business? What do you want a call to arms from them for? Yeah,
well, I'd say two things. I mean, we've talked about diversity already, and that's hugely important for all the reasons we've discussed. But I think that actually the next challenges, AI is a good example, it won't be the only one in the tech sector, will require taking the public with us. So if we're going to make these leaps forward, we're going to get, for example, artificial intelligence to be truly world-leading in the UK, we're going to need the public to be confident in the safeguards that exist. So what I really need is I need the inventiveness in this room and beyond it to be applied not just to the technology, but how we go about persuading the public that it's not as scary as it looks. Artificial intelligence, for most people I represent in Warwickshire and beyond that in the whole country, artificial intelligence will conjure up certain things. And it won't be what's conjured up in the minds of people who work in the tech sector. And I think we have to understand that. We have to appreciate that we have a job of work to do in persuading the public that AI is A, hugely relevant to them, and B, really positive for them. And science fiction hasn't helped us. So we start from some way back in attempting to persuade many members of the public of that. I think we can do it, and I think artificial intelligence is so central, as other tech developments will be, to our economic success as a nation and to everybody's day-to-day lives, that it's a sales job we can all do, but I think we have to recognise it needs doing.
I've got a bit of a personal question for you now. It's coming from the audience of, with the distractions of Brexit, with such a wide portfolio, how do you keep your eye on the prize? How do you keep focused on delivering digital as well as culture, media and sport?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. And as you say, the portfolio of my department is huge. But actually, when I first arrived, I started to think about what joins the dots. What is it that actually all those disparate parts of my department have in common rather than what distinguishes them from each other? And I think there are things. And for me, it's about connections. Actually, technology is about connecting people, sometimes in very obvious ways, sometimes in less obvious ways, and culture does the same thing, sport does the same thing. If you look at the effect that the England football team had on our national well-being and our ability to get on with each other and find common ground, and I very much hope the England cricket team will do the same thing this summer, and I hope the women's football team, exactly, I was going to say, will do exactly the same thing. These are ways in which sport brings us together. Culture can do it too. And I think actually there's a lot of synergies in the portfolio that I've got. So yes, of course, I have to move about a bit, but actually there's probably quite a lot that unites the sectors in my department more than divides them.
And as we leave as a united front, we've all got stomachs rumbling, lunch is about to be served. What's the one thing you want everyone to sort of leave thinking?
I think I want everyone to recognise the huge achievements of the tech sector. Everybody in this room has already achieved a huge amount, but we've got a lot more we can do. We've got an environment in which that success can be achieved, but we've got to all work together, government, regulators, innovators, everybody, in making sure that we deliver that tech success, we take the public with us, and we show the world that the UK will continue to lead in this sector.
National pride, not only on sport, but
absolutely
in technology.
Right. Yeah.
Jeremy Wright, we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Of course, MP and indeed your Secretary of State for Culture, Digital Culture, Media and Sport. Please do give a round of applause.
Thank you very much. Thank you.